I personally think that the bigger the world, the smaller the world. The more people of different backgrounds, different kinds that you can meet and talk to and listen to and learn from in an open, creative way, the more we would all understand each other and we could work together.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the finale of From the Magic Pencil, Voices of Writing Through, Season 2. In this episode, I'm joined by two of my former interns, Rachel Wachman and Eva Phelps. They asked me all sorts of probing questions, not only about writing through, but even more broadly about education and creativity in general. I was so excited to have this opportunity to reflect on the journey I've had as a writer and social activist, and also why we do what we do as an organization and some of our hopes for the future. We dive right into the good stuff, so listen up. I do hope you enjoy listening to this conversation as much as I enjoyed having it.
Okay, should we get started on the first question?
Let's go.
All right. So before we move forward, we want to go back a little bit and ask you about the landmarks of the first 10 years and what you hope to continue and what you hope to change going forward.
The last 10 years have been just kind of a shock to me, because I never, ever expected this is what I would be doing with my time.
Yeah.
Or that what I would want to. This is something that grew out of my own writing and my own wanderlust and this weird love affair I started with the people of Cambodia. And I guess having this very strong instinct to help in whatever way that meant. I mean, I remember being in elementary school, and at the end of 6th grade, they met with the student and the parent to try to talk about, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? That kind of stuff. And at that point, I said, I want to be a doctor. And remember, this was in, the late 60s. The idea of women being doctors, you had to be a complete science egghead. Girls don't become doctors. And the guidance counselor, who was a woman, said, oh, well, maybe you want to be a nurse. And I went, I don't want to be a nurse. I want to be a doctor. Well, why do you want to be a doctor? Well, I want to help people. Mm-hmm. And I remember my mom, to her credit, was furious with this guidance counselor. Don't tell my daughter that she can't be a doctor, And I wanted to be a doctor for a long time, but the impetus for that was to help people. As it turns out, I was pretty good in science, but that wasn't my interest really, nor my real strength. And as I got to know myself better, you go through school, you find out what your strengths are. And language, I became kind of a natural at languages. And also I discovered books. And I started reading and reading and reading. And then I got interested in writing and writing and writing. And it first started with wanting to help myself. The origin of writing through, when I look back on it, really is the origin of Sue Guiney. What did I grow up feeling that I really needed to do? And it was two things. One was to help, whatever that meant. And the other was to be heard, because I didn't feel like I was heard. I was little Susie. I was a little girl. I was shy. I wouldn't talk too much. So people wouldn't pay much attention to me, except I was always nice. I was always the nice one. Mm-hmm. So what does it mean to be nice? Well, if you're nice, maybe you're not smart, you're not pretty, you're just nice. And that was the story that I had in my head, mm-hmm. that I was trying to break away from. And then I went to college and I continued to write, and I ended up doing classics. And I ended up doing classics. Why? Because I thought I wanted to write plays. And the idea of standing on a stage and presenting a small world to an audience and something that grows from your own head, that was even without realizing that that's what attracted me. That's what attracted me. And so I thought, being kind of, a Wesleyan type student, I thought, well, if I want to write plays, I should probably learn about plays. Therefore, I should take a course in Greek tragedy and translation. I mean, isn't that what everybody does when they want to write plays? So we did that. I loved my Greek teacher, and she said, Sue, you should take Greek. So I started taking Greek. I loved it. And the rest was kind of history. I had a double major in English and classics. And the reading bookish part of me was satisfied through the study of classics, and the language part of me, and the wanting to find my voice, tell people who I am, was the writing part of me. So then I went to graduate school, I got my master's, I fell in love, and then I started having kids, and everything, life took on its own trajectories, and that took over everything, and my own goals for myself, I kind of got lost.
Yeah.
I stopped writing. And then as that time went by, that itch to write came back. And I started to write secretively. Didn't tell anyone, I wrote some poems. And then I just said to myself, I'm going to write a novel. I'm not going to tell anybody I'm doing this. I'm going to write a novel and see if I could go from the beginning to the end and complete the whole thing, which I did. And they said, okay, I'm going to do it again. And I did it again. And then I said, okay, 3 times the charm. I'm going to write this novel. And it's really going to be about, it's actually trying to imagine a brain different than my own. So the main character was a cosmologist, a physicist. I ended up creating a character who saw the world through numbers in the way that I see the world through language. And that fascinated me. And I was writing this novel when I went to Cambodia for the first time. And I said to myself, actually, if I could get the novel I'm writing published, then the next thing, if I really am going to be a writer, quote unquote, the next thing I want to do is write about Westerners coming and working in Cambodia. So the first that novel about the cosmologist got published by an indie, a small press in London. And then I wrote the first book, A Clash of Innocence, which became the first in my trilogy of novels about Cambodia. And then that's what got me going back to Cambodia.
Okay. Yeah.
So all of this is without a whole lot of self-awareness or self-consciousness.
Yeah.
And I was actually on a panel at one of my reunions talking about changes, people who go through career changes. And my role was, somebody who went from being a writer to being a social activist, and I saw myself as that. I still do. And in preparing for that panel, that was the first time I ever really articulated the fact that, I'm lucky. I have lots of skills, and I have some talents, and yes, I'm a good writer. But the fact of the matter is, my gift is teaching. I have this instinctive ability to connect with people and help them learn something. And once I realized that, everything fell into place. And that's the real origin of writing through.
Yeah.
And so once writing through started, again, it was incredibly organic. More people wanted it throughout Cambodia. Then in 2014, it became clear that I had a choice, which was just to keep doing my own thing, going to the same 1 or 2 places in Cambodia and teaching my workshop, or letting this be as big as it wanted to be, even though that would necessarily mean some sacrifices on my part. I was lucky I had the financial resources to be able to travel to Cambodia, but mainly it meant that I probably would not have as much time to write. And that scared me, because if I'm not a writer, then what am I? And then I realized, I'm always a writer. I've got a shelf of published books. But I just said, okay, let's see where this goes. And then that's when the rest of it just took off. And I realized one of the big things I had to realize was that the things that I took for granted for myself that were skills, this kind of creative way of looking at the world, this openness to the world, this ability to just say yes before you figure out why, all the reasons why you can't do something. All of that stuff I thought everybody had. Because if I could do it, then anybody can do it, right? Because there's nothing special about me. And then more and more volunteers who became involved in writing through convinced me, no, that's not true. Not everybody thinks the way that you do. You've got to codify this. If you're going to do it, you've got to train people because you have put together something that works. You may not realize how you did it, but you did it. So I started to do it. And now 10 years later, we're in 5 countries. We've trained 60 people. We're just growing. In some ways, we're becoming what I allowed my vision to be, which is just a map full of dots where there are people doing writing through all over the world.
I'm curious. I don't know if this really applies to the 10 years in the future thing, but you said when you were younger, you knew that one of the main things you wanted to do, however it came about, was to help people. And when you initially started writing, did you feel like you were filling that just for yourself, or when your book started being published, like, did you feel like that part of you was being fulfilled, that helping people thing, which obviously writing can be such an incredible tool, and reading for people can be a form of reaching out.
Yeah.
But also, did you feel like you were seeking some more formal or solid way of helping people? Was writing through like a way of extending your writing and creativity into like a actual palpable system of helping people?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, because I asked myself, will I write another novel? And the answer that comes to my head is, what's the point of writing something if it's not going to help somebody else? So there was a didactic nature to everything that I've written. I realize there's always, this sense of, I've learned this or I've experienced this, maybe this will help you. Certainly with the longer pieces. And, through novel writing, I portray worlds that are new to me, but I put people who I kind of know into those worlds. How would they survive? How would they live? And thereby, how could you live?
Right.
I'm going to show you a different kind of life. Maybe that will help you figure out your life. I guess as long as we're really diving into all of this, it would be a negligence for me not to mention that in my mid-30s, we had a cot death. So my second son died at 5 weeks. And after that, one of the themes became, how do you survive tragedy? Tragedy doesn't happen to everybody, but bad things happen to everybody. How do people get past it? Some people don't. How did I get past it? How do I incorporate that into who I am? How can I help you get past it? So, for example, without it being too much of a spoiler, in the first Cambodian novel, the main character who follows through all 3 books, she was a nursing student in Ohio at Kent State. It's the peaceful college demonstration that goes wrong.
Right.
And so the idea is, the state guards, whatever they're called in the police, come out and they kill, they start shooting.
Yeah.
And so I start to imagine, what if you were a nursing student and you were there and you saw somebody dying? You couldn't help them. You didn't really know enough, but there they are. They're dying right in front of you. Maybe you knew that person. How do you move on from that? Yeah. And by writing about Deborah's life and the trajectory that life takes, I was also discovering a different way that you can survive tragedy and move on. And For Deborah, my character, and for me, that has to do with helping other people.
So writing really is an extension of that part of yourself that wants to help people. And like you said, like, how do you deal with all of the human tragedy and struggle, and how do you go on?
Right. And if you look at some of the themes that I've developed for writing through workshops, themes like change, taking risks, how do you move on? We are bringing these workshops to people who have had real struggles.
Right.
How do you keep going in a positive way? I went to an event the other day. It was an informational event about climate change run by the Union of Concerned Scientists. A very interesting group. They've been around since the 60s, where they were focusing on nuclear proliferation, and now they're focusing on climate change. And at the end, I went up to the director and I said, I've had conversations with young people where they have said, I have to be really careful because I expect there to be some climate disaster. I have to take care of my family. Or we've decided not to have children because why bring children into this world? Yeah. I said, what do you say? And her answer was wonderful. She said, hope is a muscle. Hope is a muscle. And in the face of it all, you have to have hope. And you have to keep reminding yourself to have hope so that you can go on.
Do you feel like this is, again, not really looking forward necessarily, but that like students you've had long-term relationships with, obviously, you can't exactly know the impact of writing through, but I was just wondering like how you've seen like students that have come back to workshops and grow just like personally.
Yeah, I've been very lucky that I've been able to follow over really 10 years, more than 10 years, a group of students from Anjali House, some of whom I continue to be very close with. And these were all kids that we used to call street kids, dysfunctional families, alcoholism, gambling, growing up in dirt huts, not being allowed to go to school. A lot of them continue to write poems. And that's just a self-expression thing. I shouldn't say just, but that's a self-expression thing that continues to help them develop that part of their brain and to help them figure out, okay, now what?
Right.
And these kids, one is a lawyer, there are 3 who are in veterinarian school. There are others who have studied, there's one who studied engineering and robotics. Others who are in the tourism industry, but not just driving tuk-tuks, but in front of office or back office stuff and doing communications things. These are all, those kids thought there were 2 options for them, not 3. One is a farmer, the other is a tuk-tuk driver, and the other is a tour guide. And of those 3, the one that they would aspire to was the tour guide, because then you're meeting other people and you're thinking a little bit, you're using language.
Yeah.
And writing through helped them to see there's even more than that.
Awesome.
Yeah, I remember you were talking about that in your interview with Vatai about an interaction. I don't know if it was one specific one, but that exact, you had some conversation where someone was like, my dream is to be a tuk-tuk driver. And you were talking about, where's the line as a teacher or an educator of sort of opening doors and letting kids and students know that there's other options without, funneling them. And it sounds like, if there's engineers and front of office, tour people or whatever else these kids are doing, it sounds like that's exactly what they took away from, maybe other life experiences.
That's right. And what writing through does, these are all people who come out of a state-run educational system where school's only half a day. And there are 50 kids in a class, and the teachers don't get enough pay, so a lot of times they don't show up. But when they do show up, they, memorize this. Right. No one has ever asked them what they thought. No one has ever told them that they could think. something differently, that they have the capabilities. What they choose to do with that, and what they choose to think is up to them. I can't say think this way and not another. But through writing through, we can say you have the right to have your own thoughts. And you actually do have those abilities. You just don't know it. We're going to show you how to tap into them. And then it's up to you.
Have you seen changes in the Cambodian education system since you've worked there? Or do you see changes happening in the future?
The biggest change that we've seen, and I've seen this through Anjali House, is that whereas when we started, the parents had no interest or belief in the value of education. Kids were there to help earn money for the family. Now, when you talk to the parents of the kids at Anjali House, they say, and we say, what do you want us to do for your families? They say, we want you to get our kids into college. And it really is a financial investment. It's not like, oh, I want my child to be who she really wants to be.
Yeah. It's not quite that yet.
Yeah.
No. But it's very slow. It's going to take another 1 or 2 generations.
Yeah.
But the wheels are turning.
I was also curious about where, you now started working in the US and where you see particularly the role of creativity in the American education system and the direction that's moving in, especially with, the US, the focus on STEM and also, the now new uses of AI.
Which scares me a lot. A computer is never going to have the ability to bring enough memories, thoughts, and experiences all together in one flash of a moment to create a spark that goes on to create something new. And as long as people understand that, then AI will be used as a specific tool and not to take the place of human thought. One thing that I realized that makes me feel that the US does have something better about it than a lot of other countries, or one of the best things about the US is the idea of a liberal arts education.
Mm-hmm.
Other systems don't have that, including Great Britain, really. The idea that you could start, that there is a chunk of a 4-year chunk of time where you can try lots of things and learn things that you're not necessarily good at or that you didn't know existed, and experiment with your education and thereby pull different things together in new ways and kind of go on a different path. And that's a good thing. And people say, oh, well, that's just for the elite. That's just for really smart people or whatever. No. What I would like to see, if there was a quote unquote foundation year or even a semester, but a year better in community colleges where everybody was given the opportunity to dabble.
Yeah.
And then they go on and they do their electrical engineering or whatever it is that they're going to do.
Right.
Totally, yeah.
But just having that experience of what it's like to think creatively. Once you know what that feels, and to me, it's a physical thing. Once you know what that feels like, you've got that in your heart.
Right.
And you take that into everything. And that's where all the innovation comes from.
Yep, because you can go into any field and create, if you know how to use creativity to your advantage, it applies to everything.
Yeah. It applies to everything.
Absolutely. And I was going to say, I was just thinking, when you said hope is a muscle, I mean, this might be obvious because you've been working with Writing Through, forever, but I feel like what you guys are doing at Writing Through is also a muscle, creativity, even when you just take it from a writing perspective.
Absolutely.
It changes the way that you see the world and the way you interact with the world. And this is kind of a tangent, but I took a drawing class for the first time at West this past semester. And it sounds a little stupid, but it really, like, in small ways, it changed the way I like looked at things. Like, just like even like learning about negative space, you know, like now I like see that when I just look
that
at like
doesn't sound stupid. Absolutely, 100%.
And I feel like that so applies to writing through. Like, again, there are students that are now in STEM fields or, you know, whatever, and have done your workshops. But if you just learn how to click on that part of your brain and work it time and time again, it is that same, you know, it's a muscle, just like hope is, and it connects in that way, you know?
Exactly. And it, just like any muscle, you could lose it.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I see us doing with older people, and maybe I can imagine, we haven't done it yet, but this is part of what I'm thinking about working with people in recovery. You can forget how to do that. But also, like any muscle, the memory is there once you go back and remind it. And then it comes more quickly. And so certainly with older people who have people no longer ask them their opinion, especially older women, you know, they become invisible, kind of kickstarting or restarting that creative process is incredibly life enhancing.
Something we've talked about, and I'm definitely curious about, is the geographic expansion of writing through. And just to maybe explain a little bit about the kind of like first moves towards expansion, when you realized that was working, and then how you want to, you know, carry that forth with the chapters going forward.
Well, this is another excellent question, because it's a question that people ask all the time. You know, why don't we just do Cambodia? And there is the pragmatic reason and the personal reason and the idealistic reason. The pragmatic reason is that, well, you know, the money is in the West.
Yeah.
That's where I could raise more money. That's, you know, fundraising will keep us going no matter where we are. That's not a good reason to do it. The kind of ego reason is for me, finally, like, I have my voice, you know, I know how to use it. I want to use it. And I don't want anyone to tell me to stop. But then the real reason, and I touched on this before, is that it just infuriates me when I see people not being allowed to think. You know, it's a self-esteem thing too. It's like, not only do we need to be able to think about the world around us and make our own judgments, but we have to have enough self-confidence that we could hear other opinions and not be threatened, because that's where the anger comes from. Anger and arrogance. It's very easy to fall into arrogance if you don't really get to know people who have different opinions and different thoughts. And arrogance is a huge divider. I know what's right, you don't. Okay. That leads to superiority, you know, feelings of superiority. And all of that leads to anger. Both the people who are feeling arrogant, who are arrogant, and the people who are the recipients of that. I think that any problem that you could mention in the world now or ever, if you look at it and the people who are causing those problems, a lot of it can come down to anger and arrogance. If people are writing poetry, if people are learning how to think in new ways, how to work creatively together, that breaks down the arrogance and it breaks down the anger. You know, it's very hard to go through a writing through workshop and be arrogant.
Yeah.
And anger. You can't. Because it's all of us looking together at images or at things and saying, well, what is this? Why do you see? And you're not allowed to laugh at each other. We work together, and everybody's thoughts grow directly as a response to somebody else's thoughts.
Right.
And that's why, like, something like writing a journal together, even though we all have different experiences, somebody will write a sentence about a feeling that they had or an experience, you might write your experience, which is completely opposite, but you can't help but then say, oh, you didn't feel that way too? Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder why. You can't help but be more open to other people's points of view when you're writing together.
I've never like written something in tandem creatively with anyone else. Like the idea of having, like, of all things, a journal entry, which is perhaps the most personal thing that's based on basically exclusively based on your own experiences. The fact that that can work as a whole, that it can be like 10 different people in a room or more, and it's still cohesive, is pretty remarkable.
It is remarkable. And it's an interesting thing. I was trying to think if I had done that, and I've never had like a formal setting where I've done a group writing. I've only had, which has been, you know, so valuable for me, is like I'm in a band and I write songs, and my band partner and I always collaborate, and like we've written songs together, and, you know, if I don't know what's working, she'll help me. If she doesn't know what's working, I'll help her. And it's a really, like, the first time I did that was in college, and it was a really different and interesting experience to be like writing and actively like working with someone. And I think we've both grown so much from doing that. Something I hadn't even thought about before as like important, but like it's definitely just a different type of experience. Like even when we were writing that group poem in that first meeting we had, it's a very interesting part of writing through that I think is really, really important.
And honestly, reading some of the magazines recently, I mean, there are beautiful poems throughout, but some of the ones that really catch my eye are the group poems.
Yeah.
I think without fail, like the group poem, I mean, maybe it's because it's the first one I'm reading in every magazine, but it always, always stands out to me. And that's also pretty cool, because you'd think that it would be all these disparate voices and people would have different writing styles, but that actually is what makes them kind of interesting, is that sometimes the pieces, you can tell they're coming from different voices, but they all still work together. I also think it really is a unique thing that you guys are doing. I'm just thinking, like, I went to Smith one summer for like a writing workshop, 2-week long, thing. And Grace has done more like writing workshops at Wes, or I haven't done any at Wes, so she maybe can speak to this more. But I remember the only collaborative part of it in those kind of workshops is that you read your piece to people, and they give you feedback and they write notes in the margins, and that's great. Like, that's really important. But again, I don't think that there's in a classroom setting or in like a workshop setting that you ever write something together.
And then if you think about it, like if kids are doing like, collaborative poems or group journals, then they're much better set up to do those types of collaborative tasks that are later asked on them, later asked from them in, academic sex that have nothing to do with like creative writing.
Yeah, exactly.
When you're comfortable with your own idea, I mean, this is part of the atmosphere that we make.
Yeah.
Right. You're not afraid. You're afraid of sounding stupid. That's why I said, get rid of the editor and, don't think all of that. If you're comfortable, then you're more likely to participate. So often you have groups and there's always one or two people who do all the work. Right. So it is a combination of first learning how to access your ideas and how to create your ideas and the self-esteem that comes with that, so that you can then really work collaboratively and know that not only your ideas are important, but other people's ideas are also important.
Yeah.
Speaking as someone who, when I was younger, I really, really had trouble like raising my hand in class and sharing my ideas. And I think a workshop like Writing Through would have been so helpful for me as a young kid. Like, even when we were, again, doing the group poem at the beginning of the summer, like I was like, oh God, like this is like so scary to me as a literal 21-year-old. Like, I'm fully an adult. I can handle this. This is sort of a tangent, but I really do think that can be so helpful for especially like shyer kids, just learning that like no one's really judging you.
That's right.
Shifting gears a little bit, I was going to ask, in the Cambodian workshops you run, have you guys, have students written or like talked about Khmer Rouge, or is that another subject that's kind of?
We actually did a workshop around the Khmer Rouge.
Okay.
We did. Wow.
Yeah. I have become friends with a man who was a Washington Post correspondent and was the first American journalist to be allowed into Cambodia in the 1980s. His name is John Burgess. When he went to Cambodia in the 1980s, or in 1980, he just took all sorts of photographs. He wasn't really allowed to, but he did. And then he put all these photographs in a shoebox and forgot about them. And in 2017, he put them all together and created an exhibition, a photography exhibit called Cambodia Reawakening. And he mounted it at a place called Meta House in Phnom Penh. And basically his idea, he saw the country coming back to life after the Khmer Rouge. And he saw it all as a very uplifting set of images that really showed the spirit within the Cambodian people. So after that exhibit was done, he said, Sue, I've got the exhibit. You want to do something with it? And I said, yeah. So he gave me all of the photographs, which I still have in my basement, all the photographs mounted. But then I sat with a group of students, and I got the okay from the director. These were Anjali House students again, who I'd worked with before. And we started by showing them the killing fields. They had no idea. They had no idea. They couldn't believe. And they said, well, this wasn't Cambodia, is this? Oh, no. Because the families don't talk about it. It's very, very lightly touched on in school.
Yeah.
It's just too horrifying to believe. But every single family has a horrifying story that affected them. We talked about it. And then I had there were 33 photos. I had they were teenagers, each person take the photos. And we did a writing through workshop with prompts and discussions. And everybody took a photo and they had to write a response. It could be a small paragraph, it could be a poem, whatever they wanted. And unsurprisingly, those were much darker than what John had thought of. And then we put together this exhibit, which I actually showed at Wesleyan. I brought it to Wesleyan. John came up and we gave a talk. This was probably 2017 or 18. And so you have a picture, and you have the caption, which is John's caption. And then you have whatever was written next to it with a little cover over it. And then you lift the cover and you see what the Cambodian teenagers' response is.
Wow, that's incredible.
It's such a wonderful exhibit. But anyway, yeah.
I think
so the role of the Khmer Rouge, and what happens when you don't know your history?
Yeah.
You're powerless.
Yeah.
Totally.
And how horrifying. Can you imagine being 16 years old and seeing something like the killing fields or something that's really horrifying about your background and being told this is true? You have to believe this. It shatters you.
How concerned are you about the US's kind of direction towards, covering our history? And of course, we can't know exactly what's going to be happening, especially, there's a lot going on politically in the US right now. But is that something that you've been actively concerned about? And, obviously creativity and having workshops is, I think definitely one way to combat that. But, what other kind of modes do you see that we should be focusing on to try to prevent the US from going towards that direction?
Hope is a muscle.
Yeah.
Very concerned, very worried. I always felt as if there was a bait and switch. I was taught about, America is the cradle of democracy, and it's all about the melting pot, and we all come here together for a better life and the American dream, and it's not true. So you see something like Roe v. Wade being thrown out, something we worked so hard for, and that saved so many women's lives for 50 years, and now out the window.
Yeah.
But the majority of women in America, they want it back.
Oh, yeah.
And that gives me hope.
I'm just thinking about it as like, would you want to expand in the US? I know you obviously have your workshop in Martha's Vineyard, but I guess
that's what we were getting back to. I kind of lost the thread. Yeah. So now that I'm here and now that I see that it is trying to find a way, the past few years we've been trying to find a way to do the expansion. I think it's really important. I think it's needed more than ever, or at least as much as ever in America. Really is needed. You know, it's needed to help immigrants. It's needed to help the elderly. It's needed to help people with disabilities. It's needed to help people in recovery. It's needed to help people struggling with gender issues. It's just needed because it's as crazy a world in this country as it's been in a long time. And finding a way to be positive about that's kind of it comes from my own challenges. How do you get past the tragedy? How do you create a more positive world despite the tragedies? And God knows America needs that. As does, I haven't found a country that didn't.
Doesn't, yeah.
Yeah, it's very true.
So yeah, we need to expand. I feel very strongly about it. How we do it, how we support it, that's the struggle of a CEO.
Right. Yeah. Do you guys have like the chapter kind of plan?
We did. I don't feel like it really worked. Now the idea is what I learned from the fact that it's now catching on in Martha's Vineyard says to me that if you are talking about it in your own community, you could be more passionate about it. That passion gets translated. People pick up on it. You could start working there. Mm-hmm. I guess I'm pretty passionate about it, but like a lot of people, you can't go into somebody else's community and sell it in the same way. But we can't be everywhere. So how are we going to be everywhere? By training people everywhere. Mm-hmm. So I now think that's really the reason behind the training. Yeah. How we are going to find the people and spread the word to take the training and to encourage them to actually then take the training and work in their own communities. That's the next step of this, but I think that's the way it would work. And the fact that the training can be is online. We could do it anywhere. I want to work in the UK. We're in Mexico and we're doing it in Spanish. We could do it in French. Nothing would stop us except resources.
Right.
And even the lack of money doesn't stop us. We're fine. It's amazing what we have been able to do on a shoestring.
Yeah, it is.
And that's the other thing about training people to go into their own communities, because then they know who the local funders of their communities are. How you then fund the core group to keep all the training and the momentum, all of that stuff going is the harder thing. So if I need, right now our budget is about $108,000, and that's because my staff I can pay in Cambodia. They get paid very well for Cambodia.
Right.
I don't get much money. I've just started taking a little bit of a salary, but it isn't even a quarter of what, if I get hit by a bus and we need to hire a CEO, what I make is not even a quarter of what we would have to pay somebody else.
Right.
Where that money come from?
Right.
So in some ways, what the funding that we need is not local. Why would a funder who really cares about Martha's Vineyard want to fund an international organization?
Right.
Right. No,
and also to go to something like the Rockefeller or the Ford, we're too small. Mm-hmm. Our budget is too small. Our impact, we'll say, well, in Martha's Vineyard, we're helping 35 people. Over 10 years, we've helped 2,000 people. Well, they want to see us helping 10,000, but we can't help 10,000 without the money.
Yeah.
So there's the rub. Taylor Swift like us, and be our spokesperson, or somebody big and famous.
Yeah.
Ryan Gosling, that would help. How do you get that person?
Right. How do you get that message out there? Especially something that's not like so cookie cutter, like this is where we work. These are the, test results that show our work.
I know an organization that is a startup, and they are doing cervical cancer tests and treatment in sub-Saharan Africa. That's huge. It's cheap. You send somebody over there and you train somebody locally, and you give them the medicine. Next thing you know, you're helping 100,000 people.
Right.
That's not what we do.
Right.
It can't be that.
And we can't show that kind of originally the first question was, what impact has this had? I could show anecdotal impact, and we're trying to find ways of showing other impact, change. But that goes to some of our theory of change assumptions.
Right.
The assumption is that you help people learn to think creatively and critically. That helps social, self-esteem. That creates more, and a more. I'm reading this now. Encourages individual thinking, creativity, advance a more skilled workforce, reduces poverty, reduce workplace and family dysfunction.
Yeah.
Can I prove that?
Right.
Yeah, those are things that you can't.
How do you track?
Yeah, especially if you like the American mindset, with like business is so much like, what is this result and what is this tangible thing, know?
And all of those, in the our vision section of the theory of change, they definitely could be happening. It could be all because of writing through, but there's no way of knowing. So that is the problem.
I think what writing through does is open people's minds. So when you teach people to think in new ways, when you give them the skills to be able to see themselves in their world in different ways, in new ways, and show them how to use those skills so that as their life progresses, they can continue to use those skills, then you don't have to be as frightened. If you're not as frightened, you're not as angry. You can help yourself and those around you find new solutions to the problems that life throws up at you, both as an individual, but also as a society. You learn how actually there are more similarities between us than there are differences, and how to build on those similarities while also respecting the differences. And by showing people that language is a tool and that we have the ability to use the tools don't use us.
Yeah.
I personally think that the bigger the world, the smaller the world. The more people of different backgrounds, different kinds that you can meet and talk to and listen to and learn from in an open, creative way, the more we would all understand each other and we could work together. I mean, this is all kind of pie in the sky, adolescent, oh, the world is so beautiful. But I don't care. It's still all true. And if we don't go in that direction, we know what the other direction looks like.
Right.
Okay, well, this was great. This was really great. And again, I'm sorry that, we couldn't do this in person, but I think this still works. Okay.
All right. Well,
send us
so much, guys.
Thank you for recording, and best of luck with everything.
Luck.
Okay, you guys take care.
All right.
You too.
Sue.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. We now have 2 full seasons for you to enjoy. So if you haven't listened to the other episodes, please do. We've had so many fabulous guests and fascinating conversations. You won't want to miss any of them. If our chat today has inspired you, and you'd like to make a donation to support our work, please find a link in our show notes or on our website, www.writingthrough.org. Alternatively, if you'd like to get involved by volunteering or even training as a Writing Through facilitator, email us at info@writingthrough.org. A huge thank you to all our guests for their time and for sharing their insights with us, including our interns from Wesleyan University, Rachel, Eva, Ryan, and Tiana, my brilliant co-host, Kristen Schuster, and of course our producer, B. Kong Rice. If you'd like to keep up with our work, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And please take a moment to rate and review us, and recommend this podcast to anyone in your life who might be interested. Your support is greatly appreciated. Until next time, dear listeners, ever onward.